I'm going to call us to order at 5:13. And our first item on the consent agenda is our consent agenda that includes our previous minutes and policies. Do we want to cover the policy there or down later during technically your section, Lynn?
Up to you.
I don't think you had any previous minutes that were sent out.
Oh, they weren't? Okay. So, I'd like to move the policy to Lynn's section, which leaves the consent agenda blank. Does somebody want to make a motion like that?
Do we accept the blank the non-consent agenda?
We just
And
said no consent agenda.
The non-existing consent agenda? I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Okay, and we do have we have Anne as a visitor, and then I think we have Northwest Access here. Are there any other? Oh, Caroline is our note taker. Anybody else on there that I should know about?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Then let's move to the superintendent's report, Ms. Coda.
I don't have my agenda in front of me. What's first on?
Personnel, then student, then the policy.
Okay. So in terms of personnel, we have a support staff member who has resigned. Ashley, is it Lee Rhoda from Bakersfield? So
Yeah.
I would ask the board to accept Ashley Lee's letter of resignation.
Somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mary. By roll, Emily. Lisa. I saw your lips move. Kat.
Yes.
Did I call on you, Mary? I'm sorry.
No, not yet. Yes.
Thank you, and I also vote in favor of that. Thank you.
So the next one is a request for a Montgomery support staff member for a 1-year leave of absence. So this is kind of a unique circumstance because COVID has put people into all kinds of situations with their own family life and what they can juggle and what they can't juggle. So this squarely, I think, is going to fall to you guys to determine the leave of absence on this a little differently than normal. So your support staff contract allows for you to consider a leave of absence. The reality is we're likely going to have to hire to replace the position. So that puts you in the place of bringing the person back next year. And if there are more people than roles, you'll just have to look to the contract about how do you go about reducing your support staff. It doesn't usually happen that way. It usually kind of works itself out, but who knows in this situation. So there's a request from Jennifer Plantier, support staff, paraeducator at Montgomery, for a 1-year leave of absence.
Have we ever done this for a support staff before? I know we've done it for some of our teaching staff. Like, is this something we would historically have approved?
Not since I was superintendent. I can't think of an example. Morgan, can you?
I can't think of an example where one's come up.
And so Lynn, because we'll need to fill that position, and hopefully we'll be successful in filling it for this current year, would we then, I mean, we could theoretically just hire someone for a 1-year contract, correct? With no obligation to the hire that they have employment for the following year?
So that's the hard part, Mary, is that you aren't likely going to find someone to fill a 1-year support staff position. The reality is you're now a district, a unified district. So I can't remember a year that we haven't needed to hire support staff in most schools. So we could just hire to fill, then return this person, and then make a decision about whether or not that means someone has to shift to another school. If there's too many people in that one, like if there's then too many support staff members in Montgomery, you could either shift to another school or you could reduce. But if there was an opening in another school, they would have a right to shift to that school.
I think one of the differences with support staff is that you have a lot more flexibility in riffing if you need to. It's really a much shorter window and you don't have to follow seniority. So if you hire somebody full-time, this paraeducator comes back next year, nothing else changes across the district, you as the board really can choose which of any of the staff who exist you want to cut in order to get down to the right number of people for positions.
I do have another question. Do you think that you're going to have an influx of these requests, Lynn?
I have a couple right now. I think that we have several. We're trying to navigate the request to come back for just the in-person days and not work on the remote days. So I have several to navigate that way, but only 2 right now that are leave of absences.
And Lynn, I assume it kind of goes without saying, this is an unpaid leave of absence,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And our support staff, they are hired through the district. So they come in with the understanding that they could be shifted to another building if the staffing needs shifted in any one given school. That's a question I don't know the answer to. Just curious.
They're not hired as a district. They're well, I guess technically they are, but each individual school hires separately. Morgan, how does that work? This person would be getting paid from Montgomery, correct?
So I think the answer is that you have right of assignment as a board, and they probably don't. None of them are thinking about it that way when they're hired by a school. I'm sure that most of them think they're just working for that school.
But they have a right to call back, Mary, and that's what I was trying to get at. Like if they're, or maybe callback's not the right language. So if a position was reduced in one of our schools, if there are open positions in the other, it's not just about transfer. It's also about they have a right to one of those positions before those other principals could hire a new support staff member.
Okay. And as we've had in the past with some of these kind of unique situations, and when we're making decisions around leaves and extra vacation times and such, what are there risks in this kind of current state with COVID of setting precedent that we're kind of locked into as far as how we just make decisions around leaves of absence?
That's my concern. However we handle this first one is potentially a precedent that we're setting for any others.
Right.
So it's contemplated in your agreement that they can request a leave of absence. So I do hear what you're saying about whether or not you grant it. I mean, the reality is, if this person were to have to reapply next year, there may not be a position in Montgomery, but it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be another position that she would be considered for somewhere else. So it really is, it's up to you how you want to handle it. But I do think that, Sandy is welcome to share this part. I mean, there's a valid reason why this person is asked for the leave of absence, and it's a pretty unique circumstance. And this person is an incredibly valued support staff member. So I think Sandy would tell you, and you're welcome to, Sandy, that you would want her back.
I have to say that she was invaluable during our remote shutdown in the spring. She worked one-on-one for part of her time with one of our special ed students, and no one else had been able to get through to him and get him to do the work, and she made it happen. She is also a person who was ready to, she's got an associate's degree, but it's had a lot of kids stuff going on in her
Just for a
household.
second, Sandy, hold on. I want to be really careful because I think we're getting into some identifiable stuff.
Okay, so
Let's
I would
just keep it
say she's
general.
the one that was on that path of bettering herself to even become a teacher because she's that talented. If she had had a bachelor's degree, she would have been already pursuing what we were looking for in the district to try to push people along to get their teaching certification. So she's definitely someone that has great value. She's versatile. We can put her anywhere. So
I worry about the future. Like, I'm praying we make it to Thanksgiving in the college world. So, like, I worry about making a promise for a year from today. I would be fairly comfortable with, we will grant you a year leave of absence. However, we can't promise you your exact position back. Like, we can promise you we'll do our best to find you a spot, but I can't we'll find a job for you, but I don't know that we, just so that we don't back ourselves into a corner. This is such new territory. I want to give us as much leeway as we may need, and maybe we won't need any of it, but.
And I also don't want to promise somebody that we are going to have.
Oh, you muted,
Yourself.
Lisa. Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
finally, sorry about that. I also don't want to promise somebody that we are going to have any job available a year from now, because I don't think any of us can predict the future. We can certainly grant a leave of absence, but there is no guarantee at the end of that leave of absence that if we had 5 jobs available and this person was the 6th person, that we were going to move her up in front of those other 5 people. So I want to be very careful about promising somebody something we can't deliver.
That's my
I think
fear.
what the leave of absence grants you or grants the employee is that if at the end of or at the beginning of next year you have an opening, she will have a right to it before a brand new hire. Other than that, I don't think you're promising anything in terms of what the job is or where the job is located. Although certainly, if you do grant this, that's those things could be made clear in the letter that goes back to her.
That makes me much more comfortable, and I don't mean to speak ill of someone who does seem to be a great employee. It doesn't have anything, in my mind, doesn't have anything to do with his or her ability in the job. It's just out the unknown part. That's the part that worries me. So if it is an option for us to grant her the leave, but it's still, like you said, Morgan, gives us the leeway, that makes me more comfortable.
Yeah, as long as that word "if" is in there, if we have a position available, you will be considered. And we need to figure out, I think, how we would put people on a seniority list for that if we had multiple people asking for leaves of absence. And we only had, maybe 5 is a bad number, but 10 positions open. How would we put people on a seniority list? Who gets called back first? So I'd want to be very careful about that as well, because we don't know how many of these are going to come down the road at us in the next few weeks or months.
So I think if you had 5 that you granted, let's say, and all 5 came back and you didn't have enough positions, it wouldn't be that they're coming back based on a seniority list. It would then, you would look at it and say, okay, we have 30 positions and 35 people, and you get to pick who the 30 people are. And it wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily have to riff the folks who were out for that last year, you really, on the support staff side, have complete flexibility on where you go with that. There's no requirement to recognize seniority. It is different with the teachers, but with support staff, you have a lot more flexibility.
So Morgan, then would a person out on leave of absence be able to step into a position that somebody already holds because there aren't enough spots left and this person who was out on leave was so much better qualified than somebody who didn't go out on leave, and those positions, those same positions are open to all of those people or not? I'm not even talking about new hires here. I'm talking about existing employees as well as those who are out on leave. No new hires.
That's definitely my interpretation. So on July 1, we're going to know that we have X number of positions. You're going to pull back the people who are on leave, and you're going to have X number of people. And if you need to cut people to get down to the number of positions, you do not have to cut people who are out on a leave of absence first.
Thanks.
Other comments? Questions?
I mean, I definitely know that she's been a pretty invaluable asset to the Montgomery community. And I feel as though I'm comfortable making a motion to accept the 1 year leave of absence, kind of taking into account all of the factors around rehiring that we just kind of enumerated.
Okay, I think I'm feeling better about it. Does somebody want to make a motion? Len, you want a motion?
Yes.
I'll make that motion to accept her
Okay.
1 year leave of absence.
Okay, thank you. Kat,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all.
Aaron says yes as well.
Oh, Aaron, I didn't know you were here. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to shift to student now. So I just wanted, this is just a report, informational. So we had the elementary school choice under the NMV policy. I reported to you that you had 2 students that exercised that choice and went from Berkshire to Montgomery. That deadline passed. However, we had a new family arrive, and they are living in Sheldon, but they wanted to choose Bakersfield. So we talked about that when we were building that policy, that it made sense that we hold firm on the deadline with the exception of, right, if there's a circumstance that changes where someone hasn't received the information because they moved. So it makes sense. Their intention is to land in Bakersfield. Sheldon is a short-term spot for them, and they're hoping to purchase in Bakersfield, and all their family is in Bakersfield. So I have approved that one more. So it's 2 kids who will be going to Bakersfield. And I'm going to just give you, I'm not going to go in depth in a conversation because I'm going to go in depth at the SU meeting, and I am tonight. We really did try to make these local ones shorter because we're going to go more in depth at the SU, but I'm going to talk to you. Well, first, actually, I think you got to go to policy, probably. No, actually, no. Can I keep you in personnel for just 1 second?
Sure.
So it's really personnel and student. So I want to just give you really quick the overview of the fully remote option. I've given you some of these updates. So We're able to do 9 through 12 with VTVLC and K through 8 in our own virtual academy. And I want to give you some numbers. So the number of students in fully virtual has grown. So we're at like 265 now. So it's one of our bigger schools if you think about the fully virtual as a school. And I am working really hard on staffing structure. I've got most of it staffed now. I have 3 positions to finalize, and then I'm fully staffed for the whole model. This has required a crazy amount of collaboration and flexibility with the principals. The way we've been able to work it out is that everybody gives a little bit. So most schools have had some ways to be flexible. Like they might have had 2 teachers at one grade level, but there's a small enough number of kids in person where they don't need 2 teachers. So they could give 1 teacher to the virtual academy. So I've been working to try to find volunteers. And for the most part, I've been able to staff with volunteers. And I just have a few last puzzle pieces where it's going to have to be more like, I don't have another option. It has to be this person kind of conversation, because there's a lot of licensing things, licensure and seniority and things like that that are going into the conversation. So I just wanted to give you that heads up, because how I'm looking at staffing is super flexible, because the virtual academy is serving students from all 6 of our towns. So that's the only way I've been able to look at it. I've looked hard at everybody's staff, and no principals, all of our principals have been, it's hard to lose a staff member. And I just want to say they've all been a part of the solution with this, and I've been able to figure it out. There's a few schools that have had to give more than 1, who had a little more personnel kind of available. So I was able to figure that part out, but I'm being really flexible with how I'm using staff, because I'm looking at this as an SU program that encompasses everybody. I think I'll have to hire potentially for 1 position, and I have some ideas about that. So we'll talk more about that at the SU level. And I think that one of the things that we're going to start talking about, and we'll talk about it at the SU level, is the shift in the guidance from 6 feet to 3 feet, and the push to return more students K through 5 to in-person learning. So I'll talk at the SU level about kind of some of the metrics that we'll be using to determine our readiness to return more students to in-person learning in these first maybe 4 to 6 weeks of the school year. So I'll talk more about that at the SU level. And you have the policy that you need to talk about as well. This was a policy that was a model policy that came from the VSBA around delegation of authority during a state of emergency.
Lynn, can I ask a couple of really quick questions? That 258 students, can you break those down 9 through 12 or K through 8?
Yes, hold on 1 second. So 9 through 12, I have right around 50. So these numbers they've shifted since I did this, Lisa. So they're still moving around a little bit. And so we have around 210 K through 8, and right around maybe 215 K through 8, and around 50 high school.
So if guidance goes back to bringing like K through 5 back, the virtual only option will really have very few of our students.
No, not necessarily. So this is the school that is, the parents can choose a fully virtual option for the year.
Even K through 12?
Yes.
Okay, I mean K through 8.
Yeah.
So bringing back K through 5, if we do that, doesn't necessarily mean that those children are going to be in schools, even though that's the goal of the AOE.
Well, it is that we have the ability to have more students back in person, but we also want to give students who are at high risk or families who have high risk factors or fears the ability to remain in a fully remote option. One of the things I didn't say, I didn't finish my thought around, we have 265 students in, and we had originally thought we would be able to offer more of the VTVLC options for even if it was our middle school and then only do our own staffing. There were two fundamental things that we didn't anticipate. One was how many students, right? So it's about, if we were to just pay tuition to have students participate in VTVLC, so just pay for the spots, it would have been about $450,000 to pay for our middle school students to be fully assigned to VTVLC. Or we would have had to have given, I think it was 5 of our teachers, so you can exchange your teachers for spots. But the reason we couldn't do that is because it's a 1-year commitment. And if they commit for 1 year and there's a vaccine in February, for example, and most of these kids go back to in-person, we've got all those kids in person and those teachers aren't ours to pull back. So with our K-8 model, they're assigned to fully virtual for now, but in the agreement, it is that if we return more students in person, I have the ability to move staff around. So I maybe could do a K-1 if I need to, if there are a few enough kids, so I can start pulling people back to in person. So we had to have the flexibility, and we certainly didn't have the money to do what we would have needed to do to just pay for spots.
I guess I'm just really surprised that there aren't more high school students taking advantage of the virtual. I'm shocked at the numbers, to be honest with you. Thanks.
You're welcome. So you all seen the policy. Do you have questions for me?
Lynn, my only quick question is, as I understand, the delegation of authority policy will be in effect for the duration of the state of emergency. It says at the end that it is kind of terminates automatically. But if there came another point and we were still in the state of emergency, but the board felt as though we needed to reevaluate the delegation of authority, would the board have that flexibility?
So you have a right to take a look at your policies you can bring a policy back for review like you would for any other policy.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Lynn, I have one more question. I'm sorry about the numbers that you mentioned before. Those teachers who go to VTVLC, I understand that they make a 1-year commitment, and that's voluntary that they go to VTVLC. And what about the FNESU Academy? Is that a voluntary assignment as well?
So the VTVLC the 9-12, we were able to give 2 teachers because there's going to be a special program for some of the kids. So we're only paying for 40 of the students, and we're doing 9 of the high school students ourselves. There's a separate program that we're working through with that. But we assigned 2 teachers and they volunteered for those spots. They're thrilled actually because of a variety of reasons. In terms of the K-8, it is mostly voluntary, but in some cases, Lisa, I've worked with the union with this, and we have a right to transfer if we need to. So I've gone first with volunteers, and then I've looked at seniority, and ultimately if I can't navigate that, I may have to assign. I'm hopeful that we won't have to get to that people will lean in and say, okay, I'll do this for a year, because it is really a need, and it's very tough to find, where we have the ability to be flexible with staff and where we don't.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt about the policy.
So any other questions about the policy, comments, or concerns?
I just have one more question. Lynn, I assume that if numbers started increasing, that the governor still has obviously kind of the final say, the way he did in March, if he decided, as we did in March, that all schools shut down, correct? And that's kind of seems to supersede any local authority over staying open.
Correct. I 100% would never try to not comply with something like that. The governor, in consultation with the Department of Health and Dr. Levine, if there was going to be a planned school closure period, that would come from the state level.
Yeah, of course. Makes
And
perfect
even a
sense.
reactive, Mary, would be driven by the data in consultation with the Department of Health.
Right, like I suspect there could be, for instance, a particular county that became, a hot zone again, and they may just look to the superintendent in that particular, county or region and say, hey, tip you that the numbers are creeping up and a closure is necessary.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we make a motion on this policy? You'd like that, right, Lynn?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I'll make that motion to accept that policy.
Okay. By roll, Kat,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Aaron.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So that's all I have, Jean Marie, and I think that's all we have on the agenda.
Yes, I'm just double checking. Our next regular bat time at the regular bat channel is September 2nd. Is that what I saw? Yeah, September 2nd. Okay.
So Morgan has put a link in if anybody wants to hear more on what I gave you kind of the brief overview of. I'm going to be talking more in depth at the SU meeting. So if you want to join that, the link is right there in your in the chat.
Lynn, I just have one question, and it might just be too new for you to speak on, but the information that was released yesterday in the governor's address about opening up like childcare hubs, do you know if that sort of thing will happen in our communities?
I'm hopeful, Catherine, but I can't really speak to it yet. I think that I've been a little underwater with the academy piece, and I have been working with some partners, but that's work that I have to lean into later in the week. So I will try to put out what I can about childcare options as soon as I can. Okay. So I'm gonna actually have to jump off because we have another meeting starting now, and Morgan's tipping me that we can't start that meeting until we wrap this meeting up.
So Lynn, how do we go to the other meeting? We just click on the link in the chat, or do we have to leave this meeting and somehow find that link? Do you know?
So I think Morgan, if they just copy that address,
But that's for the SU meeting, and that's at 6:30. I think Lynn's trying to get to her Enosburg-Richford meeting, right?
SU meetings at 6:30, and the link is actually on our homepage as well.
And the
And
link
he
to
found
the link to the NMVUUSD meeting is on your homepage also.
Correct.
Thanks.
sorry, Lisa, I thought you were talking about SU.
No, that's okay. I was thinking SU. I wasn't thinking ER, but I'll go to that too.
Okay.
Might as well. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we adjourn. Everybody wave or say goodbye, and I'll take that as your agreement. Good night, all.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.